Oi, oi, it's your boy, Jack Slack. This is the Jack Slack podcast. It's a podcast all about me with occasional dips into MMA. And we're talking about UFC 262 coming up this weekend. Probably going to keep it light and informal. Didn't do a whole lot of writing about this event or anything like that. The thing that I wrote this week was Advanced Striking 2.0 Tommy Loughran, which is something you want to check out if you're a real fucking striking nerd and probably not anyone else, because Tommy Loughran had a world-class career. He won the Ring Fighter of the Year in 2 different years. He was the light heavyweight champion of the world for a couple of years. He went up to heavyweight. He outboxed just about everyone. I mean, he outjabbed everyone he fought, and he was often giving up half a foot of height and half a foot of reach. But he stopped 14 people in 160 fights. So, he's not the premier fighter in terms of excitement. But if you like your really weird technique-y shit and talk about jabbing and tie-ups and stuff like that, that's for you. Before we get into the UFC 262 talk, it's probably worth recapping some of the weird shit that happened this week, because it's been one for the record books, and this is a sport where weird shit happens every week. So, last week we didn't even touch on the PFL event, which I wanted to, because I've been sort of half-assedly keeping up with them lately, because they still charge a pay-per-view fee to watch it in the UK, and I'm like, fuck no, I'm not doing that for Lance Palmer. But Verdum fought a guy who played him in a film, and he lost by knockout, and everyone was like, Jesus Christ, what happened? And if you watch the footage, he triangles the dude taps him on the side that the ref can't see. Verdum lets go of the triangle, and the dude jumps on him and just pounds him into a TKO. So he actually got it overturned this week, which is astonishing because, good luck getting anything overturned in this sport. I think that was the New Jersey Commission, but whoever it is, well done. But if you're not familiar with the Brazilian tap, you just give them a quick tap or two on the shoulder, normally on the opposite side of the ref. Back of the shoulder works really well. If they're a nice guy who's just used to, it's partly getting used to training environments. You see good submission artists are really reluctant to let go of you until the referee touches them. But Fabricio Verdum, being a classy guy, let go of him as soon as he felt the tap, and the guy just carried on. It's the first time I've seen the Brazilian tap work well at a high level, because most of the time what happens is you do it, and then you end up getting submitted again, and you just look like a massive dick. Lindland versus Bustamante is the most famous example. I keep saying I'm going to finish what I was writing about Matt Lindland. Super interesting guy. But again, like the Tommy Loughran stuff, there's only so much stuff I can do in quick succession that's just for the nerds. I'm going to have to finish that Dustin Poirier piece just to bring in all the normies. Another really weird piece of news, Rumble Johnson, after that, coming back from almost getting knocked out on Saturday in Bellator and knocking his opponent out, he was arrested on the Mohegan in Uncasville, on the tribal land, for a case of stolen identity. Someone used a credit card not in their own name that had been stolen to pay for his flights. And I think it was 2 years ago it happened too, but it was just such, this dude, in a sport full of very strange people, Rumble Johnson is one of the weirdest. Because if you watch an interview with him, he's an utterly charming man. He comes off really well. And then you dig at all. Well, you don't even need to dig. People will bring it up all the time, like the number of allegations that have been brought against him by, women, and the time that he completely lost his mind publicly in a gym because a woman put a yoga mat too near to where he was working out, and then went on this epic Facebook rant. And you're like, I want to believe that the allegations against you are false, but if you get this angry, don't stop to think for a minute, should I post this on my Facebook? But yeah, this one just makes zero sense. I've seen people with the big brain take that this is clearly Bellator don't pay their fighters enough. No, this happened a while ago, but also, why, if you're pretty beloved in the MMA scene, you can pick up a check whenever you need to, doing Submission Underground. You've got bodybuilding supplement deals, you run a marijuana farm or whatever it was he had stake in, but he earned a good amount of money fighting for the UFC. I can't see him needing to like steal someone's identity for a $500 flight. More likely, someone said they'd organise it for him and then used someone else's card to pay for it. But just really strange. Guy can't stay out of trouble very long. Then in Bizarro World, by which I mean Asia, more Singapore than anything, but One announced that Gordon Ryan's taking his first fight in One FC, or One Championship, and it's against Shinya Aoki, and it's a grappling match, and just basically Gordon Ryan gets a free holiday to Singapore. And will be enlisted as a coach at Evolve while he's there, I'm sure. I was quite pleased, to be honest, how few people this worked on, the grappling match itself, because Shinya Aoki, yes, he's a very good grappler in an MMA context. He's an okay grappler, or a good grappler, in a non-MMA context, but this is a dude who never made it past the first round of ADCC in his own bracket, against the actual best grappler in any weight class in the world right now, and also the guy's got like 60 pounds on him. Just absolutely daft. But the way that they announced it and the reactions from people in the comments on One's official Twitter and like news sites announcing it was, wait, not MMA? And it's just perfect because this is the entire reason they enlisted Gordon, to do exactly what Rising did with Tenshin, which is where you bring a superstar athlete over from their niche combat sport and you go, yeah, and he might try MMA. And you keep stringing people along for months and months and months. But on the subject of like not being in touch with the masses, I had a real hard time with the announcement this week that Ngannou versus Lewis 2 is the next one they want to do at heavyweight. And so basically they're relegating John Jones to whatever. I mean, they said they might have Jones fight Stipe, which is a good fight, I think, but we all wanted to see Ngannou versus Jones. And nobody, I mean, I thought people didn't want to see Ngannou versus Lewis 2 right now, but all the responses to it that I saw were either bots or people being like, yeah, I really like that fight. So I don't know. I mean, that's a very lame outlook when everyone who disagrees with your worldview is a bot. But I felt out of touch when this came out. I was like, did you see the first one? And also John Jones versus Ngannou was on the table. And also, that Lewis is probably accepting this for less money than that super fight with Jones. Or that super fight with Jones and Ngannou would cost. Just a bit shit, to be honest. But anyway, let's talk about some upcoming fights. What everyone's here for is One Championship Dangol, where Arjan Bula is going to become the first Kushti-based world champion against a 52-year-old Brandon Vera. No, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about UFC 262. It's a card that I can't quite get my head around. Because a lot of it, like some of it, I'm very hyped for, but there's an awful lot of stuff that it's not even filler, it's just sort of, I don't know if that's what I want right now. I mean, just take the co-main event as an example. Tony Ferguson versus Benilderius. Benilderius, on an amazing tear, just beat Diego Ferreira. Tony Ferguson just got mugged twice. I don't really need to see him, like, clash with another guy who's, on the ascendancy. Obviously, they're paying him a lot compared to other fighters, so they probably feel like they need to get their money's worth out of it. But like, just have him take a step back, have him fight someone less difficult. But anyway, main event: Charles Oliveira, last man to beat Tony Ferguson, and Michael Chandler for the UFC lightweight title. I mean, the UFC love Michael Chandler. They just adore him. It's very strange. I don't know if he went to all their events for a long time. He would have been in the entourages of all those guys he trains with. So maybe he has a really good relationship with the people there. But they can't get enough of him to the point that if you think I'm exaggerating, they literally put out a Black History Month video segment on their broadcast focusing on Michael Chandler. But yeah, the sort of I mean, you always have a weird situation when a undefeated champion retires because, I mean, undefeated, we don't include the Gleison Tebow fight, but I'm going to get just signing myself up for angry comments in squiggly from Russian accounts. But when you have an undefeated champion retire, there's always a little bit of a messy, return to business. Thinking like when Gene Tunney retired, Rocky Marciano, anyone like that. The guys who fight for the belt, you tend to be like, you don't think of them as the best because they're taken over from a guy who's undefeated. Now, neither Charles Oliveira nor Michael Chandler fought Khabib Nurmagomedov, but there are two guys who have flattened pretty much everyone else in the division and fought Khabib Nurmagomedov recently and lost. And the thinking is that those guys should be fighting for the title, and that's Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier. And you get the sense with Dustin Poirier that he feels comfortable where he is. He'd already won the interim title. And I presume he feels like, he can do this rematch with the McGregor, make more money than he's ever seen in his life, and then carry on to become the lightweight champion or fight for the belt at least. Certainly, no way to begrudge him for taking the McGregor rematch because, as I said, more money than he'll ever make otherwise, to be honest. And with the win over McGregor, he can probably push for more money in this rematch. Justin Gaethje's a little bit stranger, but then he seems to be taking some time off. So really, it's just let's move on with this division. Who's around? And to be honest, I'm happy they are, because for a long time there, Khabib was pretty genuine about his retirement. He was like, I'm not fighting anymore. I promised my mother I wouldn't. My dad is dead. I was doing it for him. And everyone seemed to treat that like, yeah, but you'll come back for the right fight, right? Or you'll come back for the right money, right? And thank goodness the dude is already richer than Midas, so he doesn't need to if he doesn't want to. I do hate people, I do hate the guy who retires and then sits on the sidelines saying well, they're very good, but could they beat me if I came back? Ray Leonard used to commentate all of Marvin Hagler's fights, and it was just so obnoxious. You're like, either come back and fight him or don't. I mean, of course he did eventually, but it was 4 years of just talking bollocks. So, let's talk about this matchup specifically. Charles Oliveira, I already did a Filthy Casuals guide on, but just amazing career growth from that guy, because he came into the UFC as superstar jungle fight. I think he was jungle fight champion. He was one of the, South American promotions champion, which is a great way to come in. Everyone from Eric Silva to whoever else has been jungle fight champion and then come in. But a lot of those guys, I think Thomas Almeida was, but a lot of those guys, you don't continue growing. And it looked like that for a little while with Charles Oliveira. It was he was this phenom, incredible grappling, seemed to have a knack for striking. And then, it was just suddenly hit a wall with Jim Miller, Donald Cerrone, Cub Swanson, tripped down to featherweight. He thought, I'll be bigger. And as it turned out, he was strong enough to just lift people off their feet and run through them, but he ended up tiring really quickly. If you watch the fight with Ricardo Lamas, who's got pretty great takedown defense, Oliveira's all over him until he just sort of gets tired and jumps into a guillotine head first. And the same thing is true with Anthony Pettis. Just the two fights that he lost at featherweight back to back, the only times he'd been submitted, basically just got tired and made stupid mistakes. So he came back up to lightweight, and now, looking at him now, you're like, well, one, what a terrible idea it was for you to try and live as a featherweight. And two, you are never going to be able to make that again. How are you even making lightweight? He's just looking gigantic nowadays. But, we just talked about Gordon Ryan, but, there's not that much suspicion over him because, he's still so young. He's just turned 31, which is incredible because he's had 15 fights in the UFC or something like that because he came into the UFC so young. Meanwhile, Michael Chandler, obviously he's only 4 years difference, but when you get into 35, full career of fighting plus full career of wrestling, which is like fighting, but you're not getting paid. And, you're considering Oliveira the young man in this match, but he's taken a lot of damage through his career. But just the turnaround in Oliveira has been astonishing. It's reaped the benefits recently, he's managed to put on this great streak of wins, but he's been changing for a long time. He's been growing the whole time. A lot of his big issues have sort of not even he's not even trained out all the stuff that was getting him into trouble. He's just managed to cover it up with excellence and aggression in other areas. Meanwhile, Michael Chandler, obviously very successful wrestler, Div 1. I think he got a wrestling scholarship and then he started doing MMA at the same time, but he entered the Bellator Season 4 tournament at lightweight, and he beat Marcin Held, Lloyd Woodward, Patricky Frere, and then winning that tournament got him a shot at Eddie Alvarez for the title. Obviously shocked Eddie Alvarez, became the champion, had the rematch with Alvarez a couple of years later. Well, almost on the date. Almost to the day, actually. A couple of years later, lost the split decision. I remember that fight. Well, a lot people remember that fight differently. A lot of people thought that Chandler deserved the win. I watched him get very, very frustrated by Eddie Alvarez, and we're going to talk about like the specifics of that. But then he had a couple of losses to Will Brooks, and then he sort of bounced around. You know, he's been the man in Bellator, but also lost quite a lot in Bellator, which is quite. It's an odd situation because everyone treats him as like, well, clearly he was head and shoulders above the competition, but he did, you know, he'd win 3, lose 1, and that was like his pattern. However, he came to the UFC at the age of 34 or whatever it was, turned up in January of this year, fought Dan Hooker, didn't do much for the early going, and then just smoked him. So mad props to him. Certainly, you've got either the longest route or the shortest route to the UFC title, depending on when you start counting it. But the specifics of this matchup are that Charles Oliveira is the grappling savant, and he's added this amazing pressure fighting game on the feet, beautiful kicks. He's using a decent check hook. You know, he's always been hittable, but by using the check hook and using it to take double collar ties and hammer in knees and uppercuts, he's managed to make himself less hittable, or to a degree less hittable. Michael Chandler has always been obviously an amazing wrestler, but a lot of what gets him by is his enormous right hand. So on the surface level, the intrigue is, can Oliveira take him down? Which Oliveira was able to do against Kevin Lee at a couple of points, but more importantly, Oliveira was able to make Kevin Lee take him down on bad terms. And that's one of the things of like a kick-heavy game. It serves up the takedown attempt. So if you kick lots, the other guy will grab your leg and you can start looking for, well, I mean, he looked for guillotines off it. Guys who are good at front headlocks typically benefit from throwing a lot of kicks. And of course, if you've got a great guard, you can feel more comfortable about throwing kicks. So can Chandler keep him on the feet? And can Chandler hit him hard before wilting? Michael Chandler, gas tank has always been a bit of an issue. Fought 5 rounds against Brent Premise back in 2018. And against Benson Henderson in their first matchup, which was 2016. I mean, honestly, cardio has been an issue for both of these guys. Michael Chandler, it's more of an issue because if you watch things like the second Eddie Alvarez fight, obviously amazing right hand on Chandler, like throws it incredibly fast and hard. But a lot of his like stand-up game, if he does slip a punch, it's because he's looking at the punch and then he's pulling his head hard back away from it. You know, where you compare like a good defensive fighter, they tend to have a little bit of movement all the time. I mean, idle animation is the thing that we were talking about a little while ago, but they tend to have a little bit of movement all the time. Chandler tends to be like static in his stance until he's throwing or slipping. And then the more the fight goes on, the more pronounced that becomes. And it really is a credit to the speed of his right hand that he gets it off from an almost static start and still surprises people. But that really does wear out through the rounds. And if you watch like the fights again, I mean, the thing about Chandler is that he's got a number of amazing knockouts on his record and then also a number of not that amazing decisions. You know, if you watch the fight with like Goti Yamauchi or the second fight with Brent Primus, there are points where he's like, I need a breather now. And he'll just take him down into closed guard and sit on the fence. And part of that, like Goti Yamauchi is an interesting parallel to Charles Oliveira because Charles Oliveira also doesn't do a lot of wall walking. Goti Yamauchi was the kind of guy who was like, well, I'm so comfortable off my back that I don't care if he takes me down. And then Chandler took him down and he just was against the fence, unable to do anything, like not able to wall walk up and not attacking effectively either, you know? So that's an interesting part of this because like Chandler does enjoy a good bit of stalling from the closed guard. And if there's something that Charles Oliveira won't let you do, it's relax on top. You know, the thing with Goti Yamauchi was he was like, oh, I can't really get anything going. He's not giving me anything. Whereas Charles Oliveira is just like, I'm going to grab the inside of this guy's thigh, throw up an armbar attempt that will never, ever work. And then, you know, I might belly down and stand up. I might try for a triangle if he retracts the arm. I might try and spin through to an omoplata on the other side. And we talked about this in the Filthy Casuals Guide, but the armbar from guard has never got Charles Oliveira a submission, but he does use it all the time and get other stuff off it. You know, he had like Kevin Lee rolling to his back to avoid being omoplated, swept Hatsuhioki a couple of times. You know, he's really good at making stuff happen from the bottom, which is I think that, you know, if you're a guy who's like, I'm so comfortable off my back, You shouldn't be comfortable. You should be making shit happen all the time. And Goto Yamauchi was definitely in the camp that was like, well, if he takes me down, I shall just submit him. And then he was like, oh no, he's not actually giving me anything. His elbows are nice and tight and his head's down and he's not posturing up. But again, if you put someone on the fence in the closed guard, it makes it a lot harder for them to even begin attacking you, simply because you're limiting their movement. And you're inviting them to wall walk, and I don't know if Charles Oliveira does an awful lot of wall walking. The Charles Oliveira chin is always a bit of a question mark. I think if there's a fight where Chandler's going to focus on bodywork, and you saw bits of it against Dan Hooker, but if there's a fight where you want to focus on bodywork for both men, actually, it's this one. Oliveira, because he favours like a high guard a lot of the time, and just exposes himself to it. Though that's something that he's done better with lately. By actually staying aggressive and trying to lean back and counterpunch, he doesn't really go to the high guard so much unless you really put him under pressure. In fact, it was similar to what we were saying about Dustin Poirier, doing better in the second McGregor fight because he put his hands down and he was looking for stuff and trying to counterpunch rather than being like, oh, it's his turn to punch, I'm going to cover up. So if Chandler could back him up, put him towards the fence and start applying the pressure, getting him to cover up, the bodywork is probably something they could use very well. But I think that's on the flip side, pressuring Chandler back and hitting his body with kicks, great idea for Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira pretty good at throwing his arms over the opponent's shoulders as they swing and doing that sort of leverage guard and then pulling them into the double collar tie. Don't know how well that's going to work against a guy with like Chandler's strength and posture. I'm thinking of like Andy Hoog back in the day when guys, he was a foot shorter than a lot of the guys he fought in K1, and they like early K1, they tried to slap the double collar tie on him, and he stood like straight up and just went no and socked him on the chin. But I think this is a really compelling matchup. It's interesting because we're going to talk about this with Edson Barbosa versus Shane Burgos, but this is one where the guy's strengths play into the other one's weaknesses. It's kind of, it's not like someone fighting Habib where you're like, well, how are you even going to do this? You could see either of these guys winning because both of them have sort of large areas where the other guy excels. Can Charles Oliveira push his pace if he can't threaten the takedowns effectively because Chandler can stop him? Can Chandler work effectively if the guy doesn't sit back and let him, and pick his shots? If the guy's pushing him back and hitting his body the entire time? Can Chandler grab his breathers on top against a guy as active as Charles Oliveira? Can Charles Oliveira work on bottom the same way against a guy who's really good at crowding people on the fence and just dropping short elbows? There's an awful lot to this fight, and I'm very excited to see it. I'm leaning towards Chandler early because of the massive power and the sort of defensive liabilities that have always existed in Charles Oliveira's game, and the aggression. The thing about using aggression to cover your defensive shortcomings is that it works. The more you put people under pressure, the more they rush their shots and miss and tire themselves out trying to fight back. But equally, you are always presenting the target. So if you can't fluster them, you're offering them more shots. But then you have to think, the longer the fight goes, I'd probably favour Oliveira, even with like his cardio issues at featherweight, just because typically Chandler's activity rate and speed particularly fall off later in fights. And the speed is a huge part of like what people aren't appreciating about Chandler. Yes, he hits really hard, but he hits people flush on the chin a lot of the time when, these world-class fighters haven't been able to react in time. I think if you're Chandler, get on the front foot and play the bully. Try and crack him while he's circling the cage like you did against Dan Hooker. Because maybe you knock him out on the back foot while he's trying to pressure you, but why risk it? Why take all the body kicks, front kicks to the solar plexus, which are very quickly going to wear you out? And if you're Oliveira, get on the front foot as well. So this one, if they both fight like I'd like to see them fight, just absolute car crash happening from the minute one of round one. But anyway, what else is good on this card? Not a tremendous amount, if I'm honest, but Burgos versus Barbosa is a banger. We were just saying like the best qualities of each man match up with the worst qualities of the other. You've got Shane Burgos, pressuring in-fighter, loves to hit the body and back people up, against Edson Barbosa, who hates people walking in on him. But is also, like, Shane Burgos is incredibly hittable while he's walking forward. And Edson Barbosa, if you're not just, like, on him, if you're just sort of walking up to him slowly over and over again, he's going to punt your liver, he's going to try and wheel kick you in the head, he's going to hit you with knees, he's going to hit you with that lovely left hook to the body and try and pivot off. I think Edson Barbosa, like, we say pressure, but I think running him ragged is better than just sort of, like, methodical, thoughtful pressure against him. Shane Burgos coming off the absolute banger against Josh Emmett last year, which if you missed that for some reason, go back and watch it because there are very few fights as good as that. And Edson Barbosa coming off the win over Makwan Amakani, where honestly I thought Amakani at points looked better than I was expecting, particularly on the feet. But that was the one where he debuted that wicked little shift he does, where he throws the, I think Amakani was fighting southpaw. And Barbosa throws his shoulders forward, shoots the right straight, and throws himself forward enough that he needs to step with it. So it's not a shift as in you step and punch. It's a shift as in you punch and throw yourself so far forward that you need to catch yourself. It was very cool. But before that, he had the split decision loss to Dan Ige and the split decision loss to Paul Felder. And before that, he was knocked out by Gaethje. And if you want to get butthurt about eye poke, there was an eye poke in that fight as well. But yeah, I mean, Edson Barbosa is, he fights a murderer's row. He always has. It's Darius, Nurmagomedov, Lee, Hooker, Gaethje, Felder, Ige, and then Amakani's a step down in competition, and he wins fairly handily. Shane Burgos is a little bit, he's a step above Amakani, but he's still probably not Dan Ige, Paul Felder, certainly not Justin Gaethje sort of level. So I think this might be the sweet spot where we get just an absolute banger out of Barbosa, and maybe a nice knockout. Burgos, I love him, but there's some deep flaws there. Just the hanging around in the pocket too long, fighting with his chin out on a platter. It's an amazing chin, but shows it off every fight. If we know your chin is a key feature of your game, you're not doing your job right. But a decent wrestler too, and a decent counter wrestler. He does a really cool thing where guys, if they get the back body lock, he leans forward, puts his hands on the ground, and puts his foot across their hips so that they can't knee him or step in to take him down. Very cool. So hypothetical game plans. Barbosa, stay off him, let him walk towards you, and then punt his liver or his lead leg or his head, and keep circling off and doing that over and over again. The standard Edson Barbosa plan, but I think it'll probably work quite well here. And if you're Burgos, don't just sort of march up to him like you did against Emmett and Cater. Get in his face, put him on the fence, right straights to the body, left hooks to the body, keep throwing punches, make him run, because that's the Edson Barbosa look. When he gets a little bit uncomfortable, he jogs the full lap of the cage, and that's a bad habit, but and very funny too. He does it like the stiff-legged Bambi on ice sort of walk around the cage. But two, you're making him use a ton of energy, and the kicking game is energy consuming anyway. It's a lot easier for Burgos to stand there and throw his punches from mid-range, the dangerous range, than it is for Edson Barbosa to switch and bring his kicks up. What else is good on this card? Katlyn Chookagian versus Viviane Araújo. Does she arouse you? I don't even remember what Viviane Araújo does. Katlyn Chookagian's going to ki a lot. Jacare's back of it against Frankie Muniz from Malcolm in the Middle. Matt Schnell's always good fun. He's fighting Rogerio Bonturin. Andrea Lee and Antonina Shevchenko are going to have a fun little kickboxing match with some clinch work from Andrea Lee. And then they're going to sit down and discuss tips on how to find the worst man to marry. And Priscilla Cachoeira is also on the card. The same week that Dana White came out and said Kayla Harrison might not be UFC ready, Priscilla Cachoeira is on the pay-per-view. Man, this card is not good. And then Tony Ferguson versus Benilderius in the co-main event. I'm intrigued by this one, even though I think it's probably a walk for Darius. I think Tony Ferguson has lost a lot of what made him excellent. Right nowadays, people are like, nowadays, they throw you in jail if you say you're English. But nowadays, people are will laugh off the idea of Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov, ignoring the fact that it was booked at 5 different times and would have been a different fight at all of those times, probably. Tony Ferguson always took more damage than Khabib Nurmagomedov. This is the thing about combat sports. The fight is a one-off. It doesn't matter if you're getting hit a lot. It doesn't matter if your style doesn't have the longevity. If you're talking about a fight, it's a one-off event. You can go out there and be like Ricky Hatton versus Costa Tszyu and just grind them into submission. And Tony Ferguson always took more blows than Khabib Nurmagomedov, and he seems to have aged far worse. The last 2 fights, he looked very slow. And part of that part of that in the Justin Gaethje one was that he was against a guy who just had him beat for power. Justin Gaethje might not train wrestling, but he has remarkable power, and he tightened it to the point that he has some of the nicest counterpunching in the division. And as a guy whose whole game is pressure, and this is sort of like shades of the main event, but if you're a guy whose whole game is pressure and you can't get going because you never feel confident enough, you don't ever get to reap those rewards of making the guy rush and miss. It's the same thing with feinting. If you never step in for real because you're worried about what they'll do with their first counterpunch, you're just raising their accuracy right up through the roof. And that's what Gaethje was able to do. He was just able to break the pressure by presenting such a dangerous counterpunching threat that Ferguson never really got comfortable. He's just walking around on the outside, not able to close. When he did, it was like with weird breakdancing shit that doesn't, it's cool when it's in a fight where you're already kicking ass, but it doesn't do anything for you to like crouch down and mime throwing sand in a fight where you can't get the jab that was always a great part of your game and your low kicks and all that sort of stuff established. And then against Charles Oliveira, he just mugged him, just looked twice as strong as him, threw him around, which is encouraging for the main event because, Tony Ferguson, very strong takedown defense, very strong wrestler, and Oliveira just manhandled him. But again, how much of this is Tony Ferguson's age? How much of this is the very eccentric way that he trains and his eccentric style, the aging of it? Benilderius, much more meat and potato striking, great left body kick, great left overhand, great left straight, plays them all off each other, has a decent jab with his right hand. And more recently, he's been getting people to the cage and taking them down. And he's a smothering top player. And if he gets on top of Ferguson and passes his guard, which you can see happening because Benilderius is a terrific guard passer, and also, the type of takedowns that he attempts tend not to put him in guard that much. But Ferguson's work against Charles Oliveira from the bad positions, where you don't have a guard to protect yourself, was not encouraging. He was looking for buggy chokes, which, might be the influence of Eddie Bravo because PJ Barch had just been choked out with a buggy choke from the bottom by either Cade or Ty Ruotolo like 2 weeks earlier. But the buggy choke is when you're on the bottom of side control, you reach over the back of the opponent's head with your arm and grab inside your thigh. And then you lock your legs around your hand and you squeeze everything together and you try and choke them basically inside your armpit. It's a head and arm choke, and sometimes it works, even at the highest levels, which is very cool. But a lot of the time, you're just sort of locking yourself to the opponent, and it shouldn't be a standalone defense. At a certain point, Tony Ferguson should have been freaking the fuck out, trying to move, scooting back to the fence, trying to make something happen. Even like presenting an opportunity for Oliveira to take his back or something, or mount him, and then trying to get out from there. But instead, he was trying buggy chokes, and then after the fight, he was like, I was attacking from the bottom. I think that should have been scored. And you're like, oh, fuck's sake, Tony, please. I really like you, and I want to keep liking you. So yeah, like I said, this could be one of those, how many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man, fights? But it would be great. It would be really nice to see Tony Ferguson, like, if he'd taken a step back, reassessed what he was doing, came out, picked Darius apart, that'd be amazing. If you can get Darius to shoot on him out in the open and sprawl on him, Tony Ferguson's got some of the best front headlock work in the business. Plus Darius hasn't looked unhittable by any means. He's always been there to be hit. Was it Draco Close where he knocked him out basically while still wobbled? But Darius came in as a grappling savant, and he gravitated very quickly to. He trains with Cordero, so a lot of his guys do this. But like, if you're hard sparring at Cordero's a lot, you're going to gravitate to what works, and you're going to stick to it and get really good at it quickly. And he did with his body kick and his overhand left and his counter left hand. And he's been sort of the same sort of meat and potato striker from quite early on. Obviously he's got sharper, but it's the same weapons over and over again. And I just noticed that Lando Venata's on the card as well. That's nice. Anyway, I reckon that'll do us for today. If you want to get in on the Patreon stuff, read Advanced Striking 2.0 Tommy Loughran and the others in that series, Badder Harry, Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva's up for free. I unlocked that one. But join the Patreon. Go read them. Or listen to them, because I have audio tracks on everything I write. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing at any time, fightprimer.com. Also remember to check out the Filthy Casuals Guide to Charles Oliveira. I didn't remake it, and I didn't bother making a Chandler one, but it's still got some fun stuff in. I'm your boy Jack Slack, and I will catch you on Monday. Patricio Pitbull calling out people he'll never have to fight from the outside of the organisation. Bless.